It's February 26, 1957, and 26-year-old college student Frederick Benoit is driving down a country road in Fox Chase, Pennsylvania. With knowledge of hunting traps surrounding the area he was driving in, Benoit stopped his car when he noticed a rabbit along the road. He claimed he wanted to make sure it was safe, following it deep into the forest where the traps were actually hidden. Amongst the area, Benoit also found a box with a face in it, which he initially mistook as the face of a doll. However, Benoit returned the very next day when hearing about a missing girl reported in the area, assuming that she might have been the body that he found the day before. Instead, when the police arrived at the scene, the body was identified not as of the girls, but a boy. Police were left dumbfounded. This was America's unknown child.
A cold case that has stumped investigators for 65 years. The boy in the box.
The body of a boy was found in a box.
Left inside a cardboard box.
An unidentified child found naked and beaten to death in a cardboard box.
In an illegal dumping ground near Berry Road in Philadelphia.
The boy was found was used what they call a short gun.
The boy was estimated to be around 4 to 6 years old.
This boy was found up in Fox Chase.
And there were no witnesses.
Fox Chase boy.
The boy's body.
An unidentified child found naked and beaten to death in a cardboard box.
Boy in the
In an
box.
illegal dumping ground near Berry
Left
Road
inside a cardboard
Philadelphia.
box.
A cold case that has stumped investigators for 65 years. The boy in the box.
This boy was found up in Fox Chase.
The boy was estimated to be around 4 to 6
Left
years old.
inside a cardboard box.
And there were no
The
witnesses.
boy in the box. An unidentified child found naked and beaten to death in a
The boy was
cardboard
found was
box.
used what they call a short
And there were no witnesses. Illegal dumping ground
A
near
cold
Berry
case
Road.
that has stumped investigators for 65 years.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Frozen Truths, your cold case podcast hosted by Svabu and Akshaya. This episode, America's Unknown Child, is about the boy in the box, a case that began in 1957. First, we're going to talk about the initial investigations and reactions to the crime, before exploring some of the different perspectives that unfolded throughout its history.
So let's get into the case details. According to the Inquirer, the body of the boy was that of a 4 to 6 year old boy. The body was found wrapped in a Navajo blanket and left in a bassinet box from JCPenney. The head, legs, and arms were covered in bruises. According to the chief inspector at the time, John J. Kelly, his dark brown hair was shorn into a crude sort of crew cut, almost homemade, or the type that might have been given to a boy living in an orphanage or a foster home. In fact, the investigators noticed that the hair covered his body, which indicates the hair was cut very recently, probably shortly before or directly after he was killed to confuse his identity. An autopsy was done on the boy after the body was found, and the autopsy found that he was never vaccinated, meaning he never attended school most likely. Additionally, the box was hidden deep into the trees on the side of Susquehanna Road. This means that whoever found the body had to have been venturing quite deep into the woods. This forced investigators to investigate Benoit, the man who found the body. However, Benoit passed the lie detector test that the investigators conducted on him. The next step the police took was to identify the body. To do this, the police passed out almost 400,000 flyers with the picture of the dead body of the boy. What do you think about this, Wabu?
Certainly, I think it's an interesting point, whether it's ethical or not, to, post a picture of a dead body on so many flyers, because obviously it's not just going to be adults that are witnessing that, but also a lot of young children that may not be exposed to that kind of content at a young age. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. Obviously, having a picture of the body would, to some extent, help with being able to hopefully identify someone who knows the young boy, but at the end of the day, it's definitely very debatable in that whether it was ethical or not.
Yeah, I'm also curious what they thought that could do, because the boy was that of a 4 to 6 year old, so the identical features of the boy were very similar to most people that age. So it would have been very hard to find out the identity, especially if the features were decayed in the cold. But from this, the police also received over 500 letters attempting to identify the boy. None of these letters allowed the police to identify the boy. So after this, the investigators went back to the details of the crime. They first tried to track the JCPenney box back to the person who left the body on the road. Ryan and Shane and BuzzFeed Unsolved explained the trail.
The box contained a serial number which allowed investigators to pinpoint the shipment, who were able to trace it back to a JCPenney store 15 miles away. Eerily, before the boy, the box was used to ship a bassinet. The store had shipped 12 of these boxes of bassinets. However, all of the purchasers paid in cash, leaving no record. 8 purchasers ended up contacting the police when they read about the story in newspapers to go on record that they either still had the boxes or had put the boxes out for trash collection. Though, the police were able to determine that the box was shipped to Upper Darby, Pennsylvania.
Overall, this piece of evidence didn't lead the investigators anywhere. After looking into the JCPenney box, the police then went on to look into a blue hat that was left next to the box. This blue hat was very recognizable by its leather strap, so they were able to track it to the store in which it was bought. The store owner said that she could remember the person and knew that he paid in cash, but she couldn't identify or recognize him, as she forgot what the person looked like. Hearing all the details of this tragic case, I feel a sense of compassion and an even greater sense of perseverance to find the perpetrator. Many others felt the same way. The Inquirer, which we already mentioned, Remington Bristow, a medical examiner, and Bill Fleischer, a now retired investigator.
There are 30 million songs and 5 million podcasts on Spotify. 30 million songs, 5 million podcasts. Some are really big hits, some are really not. All songs are not created equal. Play the songs you love, skip the ones you don't. Get a free 30-day trial of Premium. Skip whatever. We won't take it personally. So try Premium and start skipping.
As Akshaya mentioned, Remington Bristow was a medical examiner appointed to the case of the boy in the box. To give a little bit of background, Bristow's own son passed away at a very young age. As a result, he was deeply affected by the nature of this case and practically worked towards solving it full time. In an effort to put a name to the boy's face, he spent many thousands of dollars, even in his retirement, chasing leads that may reveal the boy's identity. Now, we'll play a short clip from BuzzFeed Unsolved that explains some of the things he did to find out who the boy was.
The second theory comes from medical examiner Remington Bristow, who investigated the case for over 36 years. Bristow gathered newspaper clippings of the boy and spent thousands of dollars of his own money and countless hours trying to identify the boy. He traveled all the way to Arizona and Texas for leads. Bristow even consulted with a psychic who held staples from the bassinet box, hoping he or she could gather some clues. Bristow went even as far as carrying a mask of the boy's face in his briefcase.
So, let's take a second to talk about Bristow, because this isn't really normal. Beyond his dedication to the case, he certainly resorted to some unconventional methods, like carrying a mask of the boy's face and consulting psychics. What do you think of this, Akshaya?
That's definitely a bit weird. It's kind of unconventional to carry a mold of a dead person's face. It certainly brings into question the methods of his investigation. We can probably attribute this to the fact that his child died very young. He could be trying to find an attachment to his child through the death of the boy in the box, and he may be trying to help his child by helping solve the murder case.
Certainly. I think there's definitely a level of remnant trauma that must still exist from the death of his child. And I think that can also be seen when he consulted with a psychic, because as a medical examiner, he's a man of science. So it doesn't really make sense for him to believe in these methods, but certainly that emotional aspect of this case that connects him to the boy in the box played a role in his actions towards the investigation.
The Inquirer also interviewed another obsessee with this case, Bill Fleischer. Fleischer vividly remembers the news of this case. He says that those are the things that get burned in your amygdala, the things that shock you. Why? Because your survival instincts come out of your amygdala. Those are the things that you want to remember. Fleischer is the co-founder and commissioner of Philadelphia's VDOC Society, which is considered the foremost expert of homicide investigations. He says in an NBC 10 Philadelphia documentary that he didn't want to give up on the case.
The best way to start a cold case is to bring all the investigation in one place and go through everything. A lot of people took up interest in this, and we got a lot of leads, and we had some were promising.
VDoc contains most of the retired investigators on the Boy in the Box case. In that documentary, they discuss the process in which they discovered the identity of the boy. After DNA testing was discovered, one of the Philly police chiefs was determined to figure out the killer in the Boy in the Box case. But first they had to identify the boy. They did this by digging out the boy from his final resting place and trying to find the DNA on his body. What do you think about this, Wabu?
Yeah, I definitely think this raises some ethical concerns on whether it's morally right to, desecrate a body of a young child. But at the end of the day, I think putting a name to the case and being able to identify the boy who went through all this tragedy is probably more important. And generally in this kind of situation, a family member or relative would be consulted before having to go ahead and desecrate the body. But in this case, that decision did have to be made by the police chiefs. And I think ultimately it was the right decision.
I agree with that. In the end, to find the identity of the boy, they ended up testing many samples to try and find a usable DNA profile. But they could only get a DNA profile from one part of his body, his teeth, and that was also a partial DNA profile. But it still allowed them to identify the boy. They found that the boy's name was Joseph Augustus Zurelli. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported that Joseph's biological parents were Augustus John Zurelli and Mary Elizabeth Plunkett, both of whom are now deceased.
Beyond the confines of the official and personal investigations we've discussed so far, many people unrelated to the case have attempted to piece together various pieces of evidence in an attempt to solve the case. Many of these theories can be found on a dedicated subreddit named r/Joseph Zurelli. This particular post describes a police report on a psychiatric patient, Martha, who claims to have information regarding the case and also claims to be Joseph Zurelli's sister. So Martha's story has been public since 2002 and also known secretly by her therapist since 1989, and she claims that her mother purchased the boy from the birth parents and named him Jonathan. However, the boy was severely abused. Martha claims that the night he died, she said he was beaten because he vomited up black beans. And this fact was actually supported by the coroner, who found that the stomach of Jonathan, or Joseph, had remains of baked beans. Martha also claimed that the mother cut the boy's hair to conceal the identity, which matches the pictures of the child's messy hair. And there's also Martha's claim that while they were removing the boy's dead body from a car trunk, a motorist stopped by to ask if they needed help. And obviously the mother told the man that they didn't need help and he drove away, but this matches a testimony given by a male witness in 1957 who told the police that he saw two people removing a box from a trunk at the exact same spot where the body was found. And this was also a rural area at the time, so keep that in mind. So Akshaya, how plausible do you think this theory is?
This theory definitely seems plausible. Some of the investigators on the case, Tom Augustine, Joseph Magellan, and William Kelly, all said that they were the most convinced by Martha's story than any other theory that has come up. This is likely because Martha's story matched up with all of the other testimonies, addresses, and descriptions that were brought up in the case evidence. So it was probably very likely that Martha actually saw all of this happen, and her story was very real.
As we've discussed many theories so far, we personally believe that the lead with Martha has become the most substantial as of yet. However, she has dropped off the map, and there has been no communication from her, which also means we're not going to get any more information out of her. So, investigators will continue dedicatedly, and those who have direct remembrance of the events will continue persevering to solve this case. But as these individuals like Fletcher and Remington pass on, the case will eventually die out too. But for now, the case remains unsolved.